Alright, and hello everyone, my name is Junglebook1, and today I'm going to be giving a presentation on how to prepare for an upcoming set. Obviously, this is pretty relevant at the moment as we're on the back end of set 17 and soon to be set 18 PBE, so I'm going to be giving you pretty much all the knowledge that I've compiled and over multiple PBE cycles and how I have learned to get really good at new sets quickly. Okay, so first I want to talk about why does preparation matter? So obviously this kind of goes without saying, but new sets just completely warp the game, and there's just a huge fresh slate of traits, champions, mechanics, items, and augments that causes a lot of variety. However, what you want to cling on to is what you have learned in the past, of course, and like your fundamental understanding of the game, because that will always remain constant. So that being said, players who prepare adapt faster and climb earlier, and of course faster in the beginning of the set. You should want to aim for any edge that you can gain over your competition, and if that means that you can out-prepare them or more efficiently prepare during the PvE cycle, that means that you will come out on top with an advantage earlier on. And this is relevant because a lot of the tournament snapshots are very early into the set, especially the Vegas Open will be, I believe the snapshot for the Vegas Open will be next set 18. So you're going to want to climb very fast because I think that's usually within the first like month of the set or so. My final point on this slide is kind of like what I touched upon already, but this is kind of just the theme of the entire presentation, is that you really want to internalize new processes and information, kind of make it so that these things are second nature by the time that PvE is over and goes to live. Things like trait webs and doing rolldowns of certain comps, itemizations of units. You want these to be in the back of your mind, like already downloaded basically, and you don't have to put conscious thought into them. It should just be automatic, kind of like how in set 17 you kind of know best in slot for Xayah or for LeBlanc or for Vex, like for example. You know their best items off the top of your head, you know what comps they go into, you know what units are usually played with them. That is what you want to obviously, like in PvE you won't master these things, every single one of these things, but you want to strive for that as much as possible and make it so that it's second nature to you. All right, so how will you go about doing that? So first, I always like to start with dissecting new set information, and what that is pretty much as soon as the new set is announced, you might watch like the dev drop of set 18. It's gonna be super exciting, and then they will release a lot of the units and augments and traits. All of that information will be online. It'll be on a lot of the different like databases and stats websites. So I would thoroughly review everything. I know that sounds like a lot, but I would take like the hour or hour and a half that to read all the champions and the traits and put thought into them, and pay attention to trait breakpoints, like how many do you need to hit the prismatic, or how many spats do you need to hit this prismatic, or how many do you need to hit like the certain threshold of like 7 meeple, for example, versus 6 star. Just getting familiar with that I think is good, and seeing it in text will help you before you get your hands on the game itself. Pay attention to abilities, and with the abilities there's stat scaling as well. And then again, kind of going back to the central theme of the entire presentation, is you really want to draw comparisons to previous sets, because this is how you will learn the quickest and most efficiently. So in this context, you might think about what role does this specific unit fill. Obviously I wrote down they could be like a carry, a tank, a utility unit, and obviously each of those have their subcategories. For example, for tanks you have like kind of pure tanks, I like to say, like whether that's something like Rammus or Morgana, the set, who are just meant to absorb a ton of damage. And the opposite side of that is Nunu, who is kind of more of like a stun tank, and we kind of know Nunu has a different best in slot from the pure tanks like Rammus and Morgana. The next thing we want to think about is which previous champions or traits are similar, and then obviously that will be things like Bastion versus Sentinel, which is basically a trait that gives armor MR. Brawler and Bruiser is probably one that is more known by pretty much everybody, which is just, you know, flat HP. Conduit Invoker is just recent examples of set 17, set 16 respectively of the trait that just gives mana. And you want to think back. So next set, I can guarantee there will be a trait that gives HP or gives mana to your units, right? Or to those specific units rather. And you want to think about, you want to draw the parallels and think, how were these units itemized in the past, right? And how were they kind of like what augments were good? That's what I mean when they were typically played. What augments were good with these units? This is how you want to think about the game and a new set in general. So after reading all the new information and drawing comparisons, you want to kind of form early hypotheses in your head. Because again, I already touched upon this, but you're going to be able to predict like likely best in slot itemization for these units because you have seen it already in the past, right? And like this is obviously the whole process of learning and applying what you've learned to the future. And you want to essentially take all the hard work that you've learned from your coaches and project mentor, like in set 17, and if you've been in for longer in sets in the past, or just knowledge that you've compiled yourself outside of coaching. You want to take all this and actively apply it as you learn a new set, because this will be how you achieve a deep understanding of the set as fast as possible. I just wrote down a few extra tips here. Look for strong trait synergies in game boards. You can kind of theorize or kind of think about what kind of 5 costs might fit well together. You can note flex units that can fit into multiple comps. Like for example, in this set, there's like Rost, Morgana, just to name a few. I mean, Shen can go in a lot. Vex can go in a lot. Graves can go in a lot. You want to take note of these units that are not necessarily super bound by traits, or units that provide a huge amount of utility to your board in some way. So that is these are just things that I am constantly thinking about when I'm approaching a new set. All right, next I kind of want to talk about just like the practice of playing PvE and getting used to a new set. And the reason I titled this Mindfulness and Attention is because I really suggest that you make your time on PvE count. Like obviously you don't want to just be wasting your time and kind of brainlessly playing the game. Obviously that's going to happen sometimes, as it does to naturally to everybody, but I still believe that as much as possible you want to treat PvE as a learning opportunity and not just mindlessly drone on and kind of have no goal or intention in mind. One example of this, which I think is extremely important, is just to watch fights really closely. And like it can be easy to get kind of lost in the sauce, I like to say, in a new set where after the fight begins, you're just kind of reading you're reading a bunch of stuff, or just you're kind of overstimulated. I can totally get it, but it's really good to take a deep breath and just remind yourself I really need to watch these fights and identify, hey, like my unit is getting stunned, or it's getting targeted by this assassin type unit or backline type unit. How can I prevent this from happening, right? Like if you lose a fight on the spot, I think set 17 Pike is a great example of this, where he can like if you're fighting a Pike 3 with an Infinity Edge, he can hook your carry instantly and one-shot it, right? And that at face value is an extremely OP ability, but obviously we now know there are ways to position around this, and that is to try to put your carry in the middle of the board and then put kind of bait units on the edges for Pike to target those. So that is like a really good example of one where it's like, if you just lose a fight on the spot like that, it's really important that you realize that just happened and begin to problem solve. How can I stop this from happening in the future, right? Like the sooner you can do this and figure these things out ahead of your competition, no matter what rank you are, the sooner you will, or like the more likely you are to outperform them, right? And when the new set comes and to have an edge. Just kind of piggybacking off of that, more of a general statement is pay attention to what works, what doesn't, and why. And this kind of goes for a lot of things like combinations of units in a comp, some type of reroll comp, some type of new augment. Really take note of what works with what, and try to get to the why as much as possible. Again, as I said earlier, not always going to get a perfect solve or a perfect understanding of every single little thing. That is normal, but trying to strive for these things is what will exercise your mind to warm up to the new stuff faster. Finally, is just another easy thing to overlook is try to at least a percentage of the time play with as few distractions as possible and be fully engaged. Like for example, a lot of times myself, and this is kind of what I'll talk about on the second half of the slide, like I will play with my friends in voice chat and we'll kind of be joking around or just like kind of relaxing, maybe not fully focused on the game, and that is totally fine. But I would set aside at least some of your time playing PvE if your goal is to be as good as possible and as locked in as possible when the set releases. I do think setting aside some time for yourself to just fully focus, just quietly, just hone in on the game and really pay attention and try to just absorb as much information as you can, like a sponge. I really think that is something that I would recommend investing some of your time towards. So, all that being said, maintaining a balance is extremely crucial, and I think that enjoyment in playing TFT and just like in general, if you want to get good at something, is kind of the most important thing. I think that if you don't have any type of passion or drive to improve to play or to just like enjoy the game, I don't think that that is like a conducive like environment for you to improve at a high rate, so or to learn very quickly as well. So I do think that you shouldn't be afraid to experiment and try unconventional ideas, like even if it's something that people say is bad or the stats website say is bad. If it's something you want to try or you truly believe is good in your spot and you just want to give it a shot, like obviously PvE is a great time to do that. And as I said earlier, playing with friends is just it's such a good opportunity, like in my opinion, because like for me at least, like I don't ever get to play TFT with my friends like once the set releases. And that could be the case for a lot of you who are in Master, Grandmaster. It's hard to like queue up with your friends if they're in different ranks or if they play at different times of the day as you. But I do think that this is like a great time for you to just like, just it is a lot more casual. There's a lot less stakes for sure. And being able to queue up with friends, I think is just like, for me, it's a huge bonus. And it just, in the long term, it makes me more driven and it makes me more excited to learn and play the game. So yeah, basically, just to summarize, the best preparation comes from a mix of focused learning and genuine enjoyment. And I hope you can kind of see the balance of those two in the first and second half of these slides, respectively. The next thing I like to say is that you should certainly leverage pro insight. And of course, what I mean by this is watch what pros are doing. You can see on Twitch, on Twitter, on YouTube, there's just going to be lots of media out there that you can see from very high level players. And you should use these as a resource, right? These are free resources that you can use, assuming you have a certain amount of time. I would invest some of your TFT time delegated towards TFT into analyzing what the pros have to say. So essentially you should accelerate your learning through others. Like just like if you're trying to get good at anything, especially TFT, it's like you want to take what the experts have learned and use that to your advantage, right? Because they will share that with you, and you want to use that again to your advantage as much as possible. I think that especially during the PvE, when there's balance changes almost every day, it makes it really difficult to discover everything on your own. And the top players are often super on top of it, I would say, or at least as on top of it as anyone can be. And it will help you stay. There's a typo here, but it will help you stay kind of in the loop on current emerging meta comps and strategies, and you can then learn which comps are actually worth investing games into. And this is especially relevant towards like the end of the PvE, once most of the balance changes are relatively finalized and there won't be too many more big changes. There always comes a point in the PvE when this does happen. This is like especially important, and you can learn which comps are going to be the ones that are likely to be strong during live, and then you can intentionally put time into each of those. try to pay attention as much as possible when you're watching pros to their positioning, their item priorities, their augment choices on a given comp. For example, in set 17 PBE, if you heard somebody say that that Baron's Lair is really strong in Corki, that is a good that is such an easy takeaway, and you can immediately start thinking about it, and you will just know, like it's just a knowledge, right. A lot of things in TFT are just a straight up knowledge check, and just knowing that the augment is OP will give you an edge over somebody who hasn't watched that streamer with so much insight. Because again, like a lot of these like big streamers and pro players of course have a ton of time, and they'll simply be more informed than you and have more knowledge than you. So just listening to them talk about these things when they're piloting a comp is just so valuable. And this is like for me as, for example, like when I was coming up as a player, I would do this all the time, and I still do this. Like I don't think anybody in the world is good enough to only learn from playing themselves and only learn from their own games. Like I think every single player in the world and every world champion for every set onward, of course, watches a ton, and they watch other players, right? And this is just so, like, the importance of this is like it's just incredible. It's even larger during PB, I would say, with all the moving factors and changing just changing factors from patch to patch. So yeah, just to kind of conclude, like top players just using their intuition, they identify strong strategies and synergies between augments, itemizations, before the broader player base. Their experience and just skill for the game is what gives them the stronger intuition and helps them evaluate new units, traits, and interactions accurately. And every game you watch can save you multiple games of trial and error. For example, if they try forcing twist, like let's imagine we're in set 17 PB and they tried forcing Twisted Fate Rek'Sai reroll for 4 games in a row, and they're just like they tried everything and they just know that it doesn't work. Like that is something that you can then kind of filter out of your time spent practicing, right? And then it will increase your efficiency during time practicing. Obviously, a Twisted Fate Rek'Sai reroll is like an extreme case. We obviously all know that would kind of never be involved together, but hopefully what I'm saying makes sense, like the grand picture. The next thing I would like to say is try to balance your intuition and with statistics. What I mean by this is I want you to use, I do think using data websites to get an idea of what itemization each carry likes, not each carry, each unit likes is good. Like websites like MetaTFT and Tactics.tools often do have PBE stats where they will show like the highest performing builds on each unit. However, I would like to challenge you to, before you check any stats, you should challenge yourself to evaluate the unit on your own. So this is when you are reading the set and you see their ability, you're reading their ability carefully. You should consider all of the following things, such as ability scaling, mana cost, damage profile, traits and synergies, and like the intended role on the board. Like for example, like, obviously a tank or a damage dealer, a single target damage dealer versus an AoE damage dealer, a pure tank versus a stun tank, right? All of these things should kind of like blow up signals in your brain, like depending on the respective ability. For example, Nunu, it should set off like an alarm in your brain, like, wow, I need to build Protector's Vow and mana on this unit because it stuns the board, and that is the value that it provides, so you want it casting early. That's just one example of so many. Another example could be like Xayah, who's an auto attacking carry, really likes things like Kraken and attack speed, whereas something like Corki, who's a caster, doesn't necessarily like those auto attacking items as much, and he prefers raw damage, right? So like these are just so many archetypes that you really want to be able to understand deeply, because being able to these are probably things that your coaches have or again, if you haven't been coached many times, that you might have learned from listening to or watching better players. These are things that you have learned to some capacity, right? So you, because you spent you've used all that hard work and you spent all that time on learning these things, it's in your best interest to try to exercise your skill and build your intuition even further, so that way these things just come naturally to you eventually. Because the reality is most pros will read a unit and they'll just instantly know, okay, I should be building these units, and then that way once they play the game, they don't have to think as much about the unit and what they don't have to rely on looking up the unit's best in slot every single time they try a new character. They just know the pros will just know in their head the 4 or 5 items that you want on this unit, and then they'll, as a result, they'll be able to focus more on watching the fights, on positioning, on trying to decipher what the meta might be, right? They'll be able to focus more on these things rather than having all their attention diverted to simply like itemization. So that is why, like, I mean, that was a bit of a rant or an aside, but building the skill is super crucial for improvement as a like in the long term as a player. So just to conclude, I wrote down think first, verify second, form a hypothesis about the unit's optimal itemization, and then support or challenge your conclusions, like using support your reasoning with the unit's design and function, and then finally you can reference the stats to confirm, refine, or challenge your conclusions, right? And like if they align, then you did something very well, and if they're slightly different or very different, I would try to get to the crux of why that might be, like why were you wrong about that, and then you can kind of take a step back, look at what the stats do claim to be, or do suggest to be the optimal itemization. Look at that and try to think about why that is, right? Like getting to the why is how you will build your intuition on these things. All right, yeah. So obviously I kind of touched upon this. I kind of forgot that I had this like second continuation slide on this topic. But obviously this will build a stronger game knowledge and intuition. It will help you adapt when balance changes make old data obsolete. So this is obviously going to be if they rework a champion, for example. Like for example, Morgana. This is a really good example from set 17, where Morgana was a 5-cost magic fighter, but then she got moved to a 4-cost tank, right? And obviously 5 versus 4 costs is whatever, but just the transition from a fighter to a tank, obviously I would expect most of you to know the difference in that, but a lower elo player might not understand that, right? Like, and as a result, I do think that there will be less extreme examples where they tweak a unit like very slightly, or like for example for Graves, like at the start of the set, like his like melee form versus his casting form versus the attack speed form. I think there was just so many examples where balance or like new champions, new mechanics on champions, new champion abilities, like there's just so much room for like different combinations in this game, like for the designers to just design different things, that being able to adapt quickly is very, very important. And again, getting to the why a certain item or artifact is good on the unit is what you really want to solve. So that is pretty much all that I had to cover. I just wanted to like make sure that there wasn't anything else that I'm just thinking of, but honestly, I do think that's pretty much it. So I really hope that, you know, this gives you a good list of things to focus on for the next set, and I wish you all the best of luck. And I hope that you all enjoy the end of set 17 and the beginning of set 18 through PvE. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will catch you all next time.